All right. So before we start, I want to get a quick take on a few weightlifting cues. All right. So I know a coach who hates it when people yell push. Like someone's in a competition, they've weight overhead, go push, push. And he just said, he hates it. I don't know why. I don't know if it's like childhood trauma or what's going on, but he just hates it when people yell push. So I want to get your guys' take on a few cues. You tell me, like, is that a good cue, something you should yell while someone's lifting, or a waste of breath and you shouldn't yell it? All right. So what do you think about push?
I think it's a waste.
Waste? Push the waist, Wes?
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. It's sort of or hold. That's another one people like to shout.
Okay, what about stay tight?
Oh, during the lift?
Yeah, they're on the platform, they're lifting, you don't stay tight.
Bro, I don't think I don't know that throwing noise at people while they're fighting with big bars over their heads probably ever really helpful.
Okay, what about right before they start? What about like chest up? Chest up.
Yeah. I can get there. So like, there's a couple little things you might be able to remind somebody, like, you've been watching them train, right? They might not be keeping their core tight when they lift or thinking about that. They're sort of wrapped up in the stress of the weight or whatever. You sneak in one little, like, set your core cue before they go. I'm in for that. I like to get a last word in before they start the lift, but not too close. You don't want to distract them.
Chest up. You okay with chest up?
You know what? You can yell whatever at me while I'm lifting on a platform. I won't hear it.
All right. How about this one? So I know a guy who would yell this at people during competition before. It was a CrossFit competition. He yelled, "Sacrifice your back." What do you think about that? What?
No.
Wes, huh?
Yes.
Yeah, there we go. Sacrifice your back.
What about this one?
What about this one? Barely move your feet.
Too many words.
Yeah.
Too many words.
Ineffective.
Okay, so they grind out a heavy clean. They're getting ready for the jerk, and you just shout out, "Oh, shit, that looks heavy."
Yeah, I think that could help me. I think it's just like having someone agree with me while I'm feeling how heavy it is, like just sort of confirming my bias that it is in fact heavy. That could be helpful.
Just fact check. You've heard that one be yelled during.
No, I just thought it'd be fun.
Okay.
I just thought it'd be funny. Yes. The barely move your feet. I thought that was a good one too. One time we were coming up with anti-cues, and so we decided those would be good. Or they're really grinding, their back's rounding out, and you're just like, "Oh, drop it,
give up, go home." Yeah. That can be helpful, actually. That's good for injury prevention, I think.
Yeah, nothing builds your confidence. Like, "Oh, shit, that looks heavy, huh?"
No.
So today we're diving into weightlifting, primarily weightlifting in a group environment. So CrossFit classes, strength and conditioning for athletes, etc. Do we actually need it, or we just teach them so you can yell cues, get people fired up, and pretend like we can point out Bulgaria on a map? So today with me, two people who actually know how to lift, not just talk about lifting. We have Wes Kitts, two-time Olympian, American record holder, and the only man I've seen pass out mid-lift on an international stage with the gold medal on the line. He loves it when I tell that story, but it's all right. It's a tale of sticking to it. He came back and won gold a couple of years after that, a couple of years in a row after that, we should say. And also Ryan Metzger, Coach Metz, collegiate strength coach, international speaker, national level weightlifter, and the only 5'1" tall, 117-pound strength coach I've ever met. I'm Danny Lehr from Caffeine and Kilos, longtime gym owner and caffeine peddler. Welcome to Not in My Box. So here we go. A little get to know you round, because if people are going to listen to your advice, we want to know where you're coming from, right? And so a little kind of about you. So we'll go Metz first. Metz, when's the last time you mowed a lawn?
When I was in elementary school.
Elementary school. All right. Doesn't know how to work a lawnmower. Interesting. No. Okay. Wes, what about you?
Probably 18 years old. That would have been 2008.
Wes been outsourcing that for the last 15 years of his life. Okay. Do you prefer to eat chicken thighs or chicken breasts? Metz?
Chicken breast.
Chicken breast. Interesting. Yeah. Wes?
Thighs.
Not fair to some fat. That's good to know. How many candles are in your bedroom, Metz?
I don't think any.
No candles. Wes, how many candles in your bedroom?
I don't have any candles. But
there's not a single candle in your bedroom.
Not in my bedroom, no.
You're married, Wes. You're a liar. There's gotta be some candles in there. No.
No, there's no candles. It's in the living room. That's where the trash in the kitchen's open space. So it can
No, I was trying to set you up.
stinky
All right.
area.
When's the last time you ate something out of a squeeze pack or a tube?
Mets first.
Yeah.
Oh, probably when I worked at Clemson, we had these fuel the fire. I don't know what it's called. Squeeze things. They're cool.
Got it. Wes, when's the last time you took your kids applesauce?
So that's exactly when it was. It's probably been a month since I sold applesauce packet.
There we go. All right. All right. So last one, true or false? Just a little true and false here. Mets, you received the 2022 NSCA Assistant College Strength and Conditioning Coach of the Year award. Is that true or false?
That is true.
And Wes, true or false? One time I was staying at your house and you ordered a pizza for dinner at 8:30 p.m. and drank an entire 2-liter of fully leaded Coca-Cola in less than an hour while eating that pizza on your couch in front of the TV. Is that true or false?
That sounds right. That sounds true.
All right. This is what peak athletic performance looks like. So now that they know a little bit about you, here we go. So the big question is that I want each of you to take a few minutes and just discuss is, do non-weightlifters, so we're talking athletes, so college athletes, or whoever, CrossFitters, just general gym people, Gen Pop, actually need to do full snatches in their training? All right. Because let's be honest, most people, the goal is to look good naked and not die early. Although with the athletes, there's a performance aspect, but if we're talking about just kind of people in general. So are we teaching the snatches because they're useful or because we know them and they're fun to coach? All right. So Wes, why don't you go ahead and go first? You could take a few minutes and let everyone know, what do you think about weightlifting, specifically the snatch in general population, and then also in regards to a CrossFit class and just general athletes?
Yeah, well, can I start with a Dave Spitz story?
Yeah, you need 5 minutes. You can do whatever you want.
All right. So I started coaching when I got to Cal Strength. I started coaching in a high school football weight room, and they had no strength training culture. Like it was non-existent. They'd sort of open the weight room. They'd probably write something on the board and just let the kids have at it. So when I got in there, I wanted an organized program. Everybody did everything. We had a plan, a progression, and expectations. So anyways, I get that started. We'd been going a few months. Obviously, I've got quite a few objectives before I had planned on getting to teaching kids how to snatch. And we were building the culture up because we're getting stronger. We're in summer, trying to get ready for the season. Anyways, Dave asked me during practice, said, well, how are they snatching? How's the snatch looking? I was like, well, actually, we hadn't done it yet. Immediately, face gets upset. I don't know if you've seen Dave's upset face. It's not great. Immediately upset. Like, why are they not snatching? It's like, well, I mean, I don't know. We're doing other stuff. I'm teaching squat, cleans. We're trying to get ready for football season. I hadn't got to it yet. Just getting them through a workout is hard enough. He's like, those boys need to be snatching. Like, all right. So next week we get in there. I think I put it in on Thursday. We do probably high hang power snatch plus overhead squat, and took about 5 minutes to go over it. Everybody in the weight room did it. Some of them loaded it, and it was no problem. Everybody did excellent. So it's actually, especially if you're not going from the floor, you're not receiving in a squat, it's a really easy movement to teach. And I think it's a lot more friendly than the clean because you don't have to deal with the front rack. A lot of people can put a bar overhead in a wide grip, especially when they're not squatting, and jump and catch from the hip is a pretty simple cue. So I think that, if you utilize variations, there is a place for it. And there are, there's benefits that they're not necessarily completely unique to the snatch. If you're already teaching cleans, you're getting a lot of the force absorption, force production, like you're getting that kind of stimulus. But, when you're putting it over your head, it just requires a little more, I think, thoughtfulness. You're doing the force absorption through the shoulders as well. So I think there is a lot of reward with pretty minimal risk teaching the snatch from the high hang, catching it in a power. And then if you have these athletes over time, you can get to where everybody's doing snatches without looking bad. Everybody can safely do a snatch. For me personally, it's not hard to teach. I've taught it, to beginners uh, over and over. Like it just once you know the skill, you know how to get people to produce passable snatches. It's just not this like mystery of an exercise that's so difficult that no one can do it. It's actually really simple, and I'd argue it's more simple than doing a clean, and not everybody, but a lot of people are pretty comfortable with that. Do you need to do a snatch? No. It depends on what you mean by need. Are there benefits that are unique to the snatch? Sure. But I just think that and these demographics are completely different too. You have athletes in Gen Pop, right? So there's a lot of, for an athlete, most of these weight rooms are filled with the best athletes in our country, especially in the collegiate setting. You can't convince me that every one of them couldn't learn to do a snatch with minimal effort. Now you get to your CrossFit class and you've got Derek's Meemaw is 80 and she's in her first month of training. Like we could probably push that off for a little while. Maybe, maybe we don't need to do it. Maybe we can, and you can always pass her a PVC pipe on snatch day, right? So like I think nobody is beyond learning something new. I don't think that the snatch is like this untenable mystery of an exercise. I think it's pretty simple once you get used to it. And I think that honestly, it's an excuse. People don't like it because they've not been taught to do it well. So if your gym's full of people that don't like to snatch, you don't have enough frequency and you're not really coaching it very well. And, if you're a strength coach that's adverse to Olympic weightlifting, you're probably in the wrong profession. I think you should probably be comfortable teaching anything on a barbell, even made up shit. Like you should just be so comfortable with a bar that you can get the best athletes in the planet to do these exercises. Even if they're not your number one favorite thing to do year round, like you should still be able to coach them. So, everybody doesn't need to snatch. Like, I'm not going to sit here and tell you have to snatch your athletes. Like Spitz told me I had to do my high schoolers. I have to do what Dave says, no matter what. So I listen to him immediately, but it's not a necessity. I think it's a great exercise. I use it a lot, and I'm not scared to coach it or teach it to anybody. But I've done it at a high level for a long time, so I guess I have a pretty comfortable position to coach it from. So time.
Yeah. So one thing you mentioned there is, kind of like you don't have a problem with it or you think it's not as difficult as other things. And that reminds me of one of my favorite responses to questions, is this difficult to coach? A great response is, well, compared to what? Right. And so like that's the whole thing. Like, well, compared to a push-up, like, okay, arguably it could be more complicated. Although if you speak to a high level gymnast, they'd maybe tell you the intricacies of a push-up, and so there's that. But compared to what, right? So in your mind, like compared to a clean, a snatch might actually be an easier thing to teach. I'm not sure if I agree with that or not. I might though, but I think that's an interesting kind of point on that, right? It's like, well, compared to what? Maybe it's the coach's ability is really the limiting factor here. So, all right, Coach Metz, strength coach, working with a lot of collegiate athletes primarily. And so just kind of your thoughts on it, maybe from the, strength coach perspective or just general population as a whole. Wes said that, Derek's Meemaw maybe doesn't need to know how to snatch. However, I think it might be good for her to learn how to open and close her hips. Right. And so what are your thoughts on this, Coach Metz?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of my experience lies in the collegiate setting instead of Gen Pop. And so I learned how to Olympic lift very early on in my coaching career. Kentucky is where I started my internship and became a GA. So that was one of the first things you learned was how to move the barbell and how to do it well. So we all learned how to Olympic lift. All of the teams Olympic lifted. There were very few exceptions to that within that program. And so as a young coach, I thought everyone had to. So when I moved on to my next position at VCU, I made all of my athletes Olympic lift. I taught them how to clean. I taught them how to snatch. If I felt like it was appropriate, I taught them some of the overhead, jerk variations and all of that stuff. And then I started to realize some of these positions look pretty terrible, or maybe this isn't really getting the stimulus that I want for these athletes. And I feel very comfortable coaching and teaching the Olympic lift, so it was never an issue of comfort for me. When I got to Clemson, they were very much anti-Olympic lifting. They said, we don't do that here. And I was like, well, that's cool. So how do I get the same, stimulus that I need from my athletes? And I realized at Clemson, I don't have to do the movement. I just have to find a way to either get the pattern or get the stimulus. And so when it comes to Olympic lifting, do my athletes need to snatch or need to clean? No, not necessarily. I think the most common strength coach answer is it depends. Who's your population? What's the stimulus you're trying to get from it? I kind of have a different train of thought. I think it's way easier to teach snatch if you've already taught your athletes how to clean. And the reason I say that is because a lot of the movements and positioning is similar. And so if they're comfortable moving that bar in a pattern from the ground to their shoulders or from their knees to their shoulders, they're a lot more comfortable letting it pass their face. So I like to teach the clean first and then the snatch. I can't say that I have ever taught athletes snatch from the ground. So we're not pulling from the ground. It's always been from the hip. And so again, I just think it's what stimulus do you want? What's your population? And does it make the most sense? And if not, what other variations or things can you do for the athlete to get something similar that you're searching for? So it depends.
So on that, what would you do instead? So you go to Clemson and you feel like you've kind of got this figured out. Like if I want kids to get explosive and learn how to open and close their hip or open and then close their hip, right. And be, proficient at that and that type of thing and work on the speed and all the other benefits of it. So then you show up and they say, oh, we don't do that here. Right. And so what'd you figure out, or what they show you or teach you, or how'd that go? What did you use instead to get that same stimulus and that same response you're looking for?
I, in my opinion, feel like Olympic lifting, really, you get the most bang for your buck. So it's the quickest way to get the best stimulus possible for that type of adaptation, at least in my opinion. And so when I was kind of faced with like, hey, we don't do that here, I was like, okay, let me break down the Olympic lifts and why do we actually do them? And then let's talk about how I can get that somewhere else. And so what I started doing with my athletes is I peppered in a lot more mobility work with them. I did a lot more strength work with them. I paired it with a lot more plyometric work. I called them high CNS and low CNS jumps. And so in our warm-up sets, we would do some low CNS, smaller, like pogo type of movements. And then in our working sets, when we're going really heavy on a lower body thing, I'm pairing it with a really high CNS taxing jump. So they're still getting the stimulus, they're still getting that pattern, but you have to kind of jigsaw it together. So it takes more time. Yeah,
it's funny. It's like can you get the same stimulus? Well, honestly, probably not. Can you get a similar stimulus, right? Can you get an 80% result? Probably, but why would you get an 80% result when you could just teach something and get 100% result, right?
Right. And so the other workaround that I had was that I started being very creative with movements that we did in the weight room and disguising them so that they weren't Olympic lifts if someone saw them. So we would do like rotational landmine movements for our softball athletes so that they learn how to throw weight quickly. And so right. I learned to be very creative and have a workaround, but still get the same patterns and stimulus that I wanted.
So as part of the reason they didn't want to do the Olympic lifts, was it a fear of injury?
Fear, risk versus reward. And I think it was just a lack of comfortability with those movements.
Yeah. So on that risk versus reward and a fear of these athletes maybe getting injured in the weight room, is that something that either one of you have seen be an actual thing? Not specifically with people training weightlifting full time. That's a different story, right? But with an athlete or someone who is using, the weightlifting lifts in their training, have either of you seen that actually being a big risk factor, having athletes get injured doing those lifts more than other lifts?
I've not had a acute weightlifting injury with anybody that I've ever coached, especially in like a strength sport setting. And a lot of time, we'd still max cleans. We wouldn't go heavy on the snatch, but I'd let them like do some open-ended clean workouts. And no, I think if you're paying attention and everybody understands the movements pretty well, you can pretty well mitigate those acute injuries.
Coach
Yeah,
Metz,
I
what
mean,
about you?
if you take a look at the research and all the literature, you'll see weightlifting actually has like the lowest incidence of injury of anything. That athlete playing their sport has a higher risk of getting hurt out there on the court, on the field, on the whatever, than they do in the weight room. And so as far as actually seeing an injury, I think maybe I've seen one, and it was on a max out day and someone tried to save a lift that they should have dumped. But as a strength and conditioning coach, you have to teach them how to miss lifts as well, because if you are going to put them in situations where things are heavy and you think that there is a risk of injury, then you teach them well beforehand, like, this is not for you to get some crazy max out number. We're literally doing this to help supplement your sport. You catching that clean for 5 more pounds isn't worth it. Just drop it. So I've had those conversations before, but I mean, beyond that, a number of years ago, as like an intern watching, I can't say that anything sticks out.
Is there any athlete specifically, like maybe in a general population person in a CrossFit class, or an athlete in the weight room that you just wouldn't do snatches with? Like, I know, so baseball is an interesting thing, right? So I've heard both ways. I've heard that there's more recently in the past few years, actually been some, research and stuff coming out that was about baseball players using the snatch and the clean and jerk and having these incredible benefits. And they don't know if it's a relationship between, like, you're holding a barbell, is that, I don't know, it's a cylinder, kind of like a bat or whatever. I don't really know. But basically, there's some things where they've been doing some more with baseball players and getting incredible results, which isn't really a shock to anybody who's comfortable with and has experience with the lifts, right? However, I've also heard that's one sport that people get real touchy about because, there's all these shoulder and elbow injuries within the sport itself. So I'm not sure if it's a concern for overuse or if it's just people who just don't know how to teach the Olympic lifts or whatever's going on. But that's just one sport specifically I've heard a lot of pushback on. So my question is, maybe touch on baseball specifically, but even in the broader sense, like, what athletes or what individuals would you just not do weightlifting with for some reason? Or is that a false fear? Is there no group that you think shouldn't be doing them?
The only where I'd be careful is if somebody's been hurt or is hurt, like usually weak muscles, bad patterns, like it's not going to give you a good stimulus anyways. They're going to be kind of moving around like this injury that it's not going to, if you can't get a good lockout, right? Like you're going to start chewing your wrist up, your shoulder up. So like there's maybe people that we have work to do before we get to weightlifting, or maybe you're just too hurt. You've been too hurt. Like your elbow's just never going to be straight again. So there's like those instances where I'd consider it. But in as far as to baseball, the reason we use weights is to be more durable, right? We take on resistance, we produce force, absorb force to make our bodies more resilient. The weight room should be rehabilitative, right?
Sure.
And where they get the overuse injuries likely on the field. So they're doing an asymmetric pattern over and over again across the same joint. And then they completely skip the rehabilitation process in the weight room because for some reason that's the part that's bad for you, not throwing the ball 100 times, 95 miles an hour or whatever they do. I don't know. I've not looked at a baseball pitching load or anything like that. But I mean, it just, to me, like, if you can't snatch because it loads the joints that you use in the sport, then you can't lift weights because it loads the joints you use in the sport. Like a football player is going to load his hips in every direction repeatedly in a practice, right? So by that logic, like, we can't do hip extensions or absorb force at the hip because we're going to overuse the hip, I think. So, that being said, you have to load it correctly, right? You can't just max their snatch all the time because they need stronger shoulders, elbows, wrists. But can you implement it to make a more durable athlete? Like, I'd say, yeah, probably.
All right. What about you, Coach Metz? Is there any athletes that you would just, if it was completely up to you, that you would say, nope, this specific sport or these specific people should just not use the lifts?
And that's a really interesting question considering my current situation right now. So my boyfriend is a head baseball coach in college. And so I actually handle all of the strength and conditioning for his 60 guys. And that's a discussion that we've had. And for me, I have always grown up in a culture of baseball does not Olympic lift. because I think it's always been a risk versus reward. And I can't say that I've explored it a ton, but I do tend to move away from it for them, because I don't think that putting the stress on the elbow or whatever it may be for the sake of a clean is worth it, because you're supposed to be putting stress on those joints to play the sport. So again, I kind of go in the direction of doing things subset together, where we're doing jumps or heavy lifting or whatever it may be. I do implement a ton of upper body prehab for those guys, but I also know that UCL tears and Tommy John surgery runs rampant the way, ACL with soccer does. And so you just want to be really, really mindful. And I just can't imagine, what would my home life and work life be like if one of the guys got so hurt in the weight room because we did a snatch. Like I don't think it's worth it for me with them. And so I don't do it with baseball. I have done it with my tennis athletes, and I have had a lot of pushback from other coaches with tennis because, again, they say stress on the elbow. I thought it was great for them because they're explosive athletes and they work in a short, small court, and they loved it. And so as long as, to Wes's point, if there's poor movement patterns, if there's injury history, like, when I was a young coach and I was watching my lacrosse players and some of my field hockey players, just they weren't moving well, I probably should have had a better solution for them. But for the most part, like special population, I probably would shy away from it more so for baseball than any other team, but you have other things to consider.
So something else that, an interesting kind of a way someone could push back on that. I'm not necessarily going to, because I'm not sure how I feel about this. This is one of these things like I'd have to think about and explore more. But so that, you have that kind of catch-22 where it's, okay, well, these people, their elbows and shoulders get a lot of abuse. And so do we really need to have them put a barbell overhead in a dynamic movement, right? However, you could also argue the exact opposite. Say, hey, these guys' elbows and shoulders go through a lot of abuse in their sport. And so strengthening them in a more controlled environment, like with a snatch or a clean, could possibly be the best thing for it, because doing snatches, if done correctly, is going to be strengthening those joints, not a detriment, right? And actually getting a bar up behind your head, right? You could see some shoulder girdle, strengthening and actually stability. So it might actually increase the stability in those joints. But again, it's the comfort teaching the lift, also with a lot of other coaches. Obviously, you're comfortable with it, but and also with, okay, how often are you around this athlete? How much training are they doing on their own? How old are they, to the degree of how mature are they? If it doesn't look good and you tell them that they need to use less weight, and if it looks good and this person is a proficient snatcher, it's probably not going to be doing much more harm. It may just be strengthening the joint to a certain degree. However, if they're sloppy with it, then that might cause a problem. So will they actually lower the weight and use an empty barbell or whatever if they need to clean up the technique? And that's where it gets tough, right? All right. Now on that kind of same topic, sport specific training, I have a opinion on this. I'd like to hear your guys' take on it. So you have an athlete, we stick with whatever, we stick with baseball, I guess, doesn't really matter. You have someone who says, okay, I'm going to do strength conditioning for baseball players. And so based on the sport and what, the movement patterns within that sport look like, there's lots of rotational things. And so we should definitely be throwing a med ball against a wall using a rotational pattern. Okay, there's a lot of, throwing. And so we should be doing these same movement patterns. What are your thoughts? Okay, so and you can tell me if I'm wrong, tell me that you disagree. But I always thought that seemed like the silliest I've ever heard of in my life. Like they're going to practice and the guy's swinging a bat, 100 times every single day. And then you go in the weight room and you're going to have them do the same rotation movement with a medicine ball, throwing it against a wall, trying to develop more power. But what you're really doing is you're just doing the same you're doing the same movement pattern. And I think that then you are actually like, you're just going to be the cause of these overuse injuries. So my belief is that really in the strength conditioning environment, the goal is to make them the best athlete that they can be, and to not necessarily to avoid what they're doing on the field, but the idea of mimicking playing movement patterns in order to strengthen those movement patterns, I always thought seemed like probably not the best way to go. So am I totally off here? Is there, a lot more benefit to doing that? Or do you think that that might be, the way to go, right? Just the goal is to make them a best all around athlete possible, and that mimicking the movements they do on the playing field is probably not the best way to do that.
Yeah,
Tell me if I'm wrong or right, or
no,
some of each.
that's how I feel. So I've always thought of the weight room as a general tool. So you want general strength, general power, like you're developing a well-rounded person. And then they get out on the field. That's where they do the sport specific stuff. So they're applying the strength and they're applying the power that you help them get in the weight room to the sport there. I think there is like a role, like, baseball, they do things the same way, right? If you're right-handed, you always swing right-handed, you throw right-handed. So like you could think about like patterning the opposite,
That's
right?
interesting.
So you get in the weight room, if you want to do some med ball throws, I mean, do they need to do 2 to 1 to the other side to
Because
try
they
to
are
like,
fun. They are fun.
they are fun. They break, walls sometimes too, which makes you feel powerful. Um, but like for me, like in the split jerk, right? I learned this as I got older, I didn't recover as fast, but doing the same foot forward, I could only do it one way. I learned late in life and I got really good at doing it that way. But eventually I'd wake up at night to go take a piss and then my shoulders are facing the wall and my hips are facing forward. And I'm like, what's going on? But basically that just slight, the feet move, right? The hips come around just a little bit. They're not supposed to. Ideally, they stay stacked. They move a little bit, right? You sort of build this pattern, this like twist through your spine that as you get older and don't recover as well, sort of gets locked in. So now when I do split jerks, I do split jerks on both sides, and I try to do some unilateral, like I'll do split squats. I'll make sure that I'm trying to like reverse pattern the one that I'm loading. So I could see like that being put into your accessory work or something you do is like in your health protocol, right? And you're like in your, whatever you use to keep your athletes healthy, right? Not necessarily a big part of your training, but if I'm going to think about, okay, they're doing this thing on the field all the time one way, let's try to get the body back to balance by doing it the other way. So it's not going to be a primary or maybe even a secondary thing that putting on a program, but I could see myself doing a little bit of that. And it is fun. I mean, you do slam balls, everybody tries pretty hard at slam balls. So, get if you want to just get kids to try hard to do something, especially if you're in a high school weight room, like set a dummy out and let them beat it up just for one of their accessory movements. And that's something they'll try hard at. And anytime you try hard, you get some kind of stimulus, some kind of result. So I guess that's where I'm at on it.
Yeah, Coach Mess, what do you think?
Yeah, well, I mean, you opened the question with sport specific training, and I think I have a very different definition of sport specific than probably most strength and conditioning coaches that kind of talk about this. When I think sport specific, I don't think movement patterns. I think like, what are the qualities and characteristics that you need in order to play your sport? Okay, how can we get that? And so just for a really quick example, I always explain to like when I would talk to recruits and stuff, it's like, okay, we're not going to be, if I'm playing baseball or if I'm, a soccer athlete, like we're not going to kick the soccer ball in the weight room or we're not going to like swing the bat in the weight room. But if you need a strong lower body, we're going to get lower body strength. And how do we do that? So that is sport specific to me. As far as staying on theme with baseball, your weight room stuff, just like Wes said, it should be pretty general. And so when you're so far out from competition, your program for a baseball team might look just like your program for, an off-season soccer team. They should look very similar, very vanilla, and very basic. The only time that I get a little bit more sport specific and do some rotational patterning is when we've already built it up their core and their pillar strength enough in order to handle that so that they can actually produce power through the rotation. And then kind of to Wes's point, like if we're doing med ball stuff and you always are going to swing righty, like we're still doing med ball right and left in the weight room. So we're still training both sides, but we're obviously not doing it at the volume or maybe even the intensity of which they're going to be doing it out on the field. And I know that we were talking about like overtraining as kind of the reasoning behind it, but I have a question that I was thinking about, and maybe you guys can talk about this, but it leads into my point of like, symmetry versus asymmetry and what makes athletes really good versus what puts them at risk of injury. And so if you only always train the right side, but that's because you're a righty, should you be training the left to try to balance it, or do you lean into constantly training the right because that's your strength? And so that's one of the things that I always kind of go back and forth with is, do you fix the asymmetry, work both sides, or do you constantly lean to the side that the athlete is already strong in because that's what makes them so good at their sport?
I mean, I'd like to hear Wes's take on that too. My initial thought on that is, I think I don't know if I say the number one job of a strength coach or for training an athlete is, well, I mean, you want to make them the best athletes possible, right? But I'd say number 1A with that, or whatever, 1B, however you want to say it, is to have as many players available in the last game of the season as possible, right? And so that's the balance. Is you don't want to, I don't think you want to be so soft that nobody's making any progress, right? However, the main part of the job is, not even talk about in the weight room specifically, but part of the job is to help them not get injured on the field and help them not get injured. I mean, a lot of times, most people you talk to that throw their back out, it's not when they're maxing out their deadlift. It almost never happens then. It happens when they're getting something out of the fridge, or it happens they're like warming up and there's 135 pounds in the bar and they're just fiddle around and like something goes wrong, right? And so, in those regards, if an athlete gets hurt on the field, now obviously if it's football and they get hit, that's one thing, but you're talking about whatever, like ACL injuries in soccer, or UCL things in baseball, so the goal is to prevent as many of those things as possible as well. So you want to make them the best well-rounded athlete as possible so they perform well on the field, and as part of that, have as many players as possible be available in the last game of the season. And so I think that's really where the answer to this kind of lies, is, do you work both sides? Well, I think yes, because if you just lean into asymmetrical, movement, right? Like think of like the arm wrestler who's got like one jacked arm and the other one, like, right, type thing. Like, okay, so yeah, there's something to that, but also I think that the more balanced people are, the less prone to injury they're going to be. And if all of your athletes are taking a piss facing the wrong wall in the middle of the night, then I feel like they're more likely to get injured on the field as well. And so that's just kind of where I come around to it. I think there's an answer in there somewhere.
Yeah, I think like, you definitely want symmetry in your back, your hips, right? That's sort of like your alignment. And I don't know, I feel like even as you develop that one side more, like you still need the resistance from the other side, right? If the wind gets so tight to one side, it's like you're already wound. You can't, I'm sort of talking out of my ass a little bit, but right, if you get so twisted up, now you don't have that resistance from the other side. You're sort of like locked into that one. But to Metz's point about being sport specific, right? As I get closer to the competition, I'm not going to try to do my jerks with both feet forward at my competition weights. I can't. I'm going to dump something on my head. But I need to be sport specific in that moment. But as soon as I compete, we're going back to power jerks, push press. We're going back to bilateral shoulder to overhead. And then I'm staying on my unilateral like accessory work to try to get back to baseline. So that, like, I think the back, you always want to be symmetrical, the hips. Now, like, you see the tennis players, they've got like a juiced one forearm and then like a little wimpy other one. Like, we can't do enough, like, what are the like stress balls or coil squeezes to like get those forearms tied. It's just not going to happen. You're not going to ask them to go play tennis left-handed to try to catch it up. Like that asymmetry, we can probably let go, right? We're not going to fix that.
Perhaps in the warm up, like same thing with you, even when you're in competition season, you could potentially, like when you're warming up with an empty bar, do a couple split jerks on both sides, just kind of loosen up the body. And although you may not get a bunch of strength gains out of that, you may at least loosen up some muscle tissue and not be bound up on that other side, right?
Yeah. And I didn't know that was even a thing. I thought you just had your foot. You always used your foot. I was talking to Tarakti because I ended up tweaking my hip, and I was telling him, I feel like I'm always twisted up. I got this bad strain in adductor rectus abdominis doing a heavy jerk. It's like, yeah, we actually do both feet forward pretty much until like the realization phase, like your last bit of training before you go into your meet. And then even on those days, we don't stop switching until you get to like the heavier weights. So in other systems, they just do both feet all the time. They still have a strong foot, but they always ramp up the lighter weights with both. And then I guess they sort of mitigate that imbalance. Now, I don't know, like in a baseball setting, how you utilize that, but I don't know. I think certain asymmetries are going to be really important to pay attention to and mitigate, and then some are just going to be untenable. Like you're not going to fix the forearm or the huge bicep or whatever, and maybe we don't need to. But if you're all twisted up like a corkscrew after the game, like we should probably try to get you back to some kind of balance.
So on the same topic, actually leads right into something else I had down here is back squats. Right. So there's a popular strength coach who's been on the athlete shouldn't back squat wagon for decades. My personal opinion is that he has that opinion because if you're a contrarian, people pay attention to you. And anyway, but so, Mike Boyle, I'll just say, I'll call him out. Anyway, says that athletes shouldn't back squat, that they're silly for athletes. He says a lot of stuff, but that's kind of his main shtick. That's the hill he's decided to die on, is that back squatting is bad for people. He's also had a lot of success, right? As far as whatever, being the strength coach for, a baseball team that won World Series. Although the difference between being a strength coach for a high school and collegiate athletes, professional athletes, is a different thing as well. But just we can set that aside because he's done some college stuff as well. But also recently on a podcast, this was on my psyche recently because someone sent me a podcast of him and a couple other old guys talking about things that people shouldn't do because they're just like the risk reward isn't there. And every single one of these motherfuckers had some sort of injury that prevented them from regular life stuff, right? Like Mike Boyle says like people shouldn't back squat because the risk reward isn't there. And then later on in the podcast, he goes on to say that his shoulders are so jacked up, he can't even swim. And like, that's a basic life skill. You know what I mean? And so it's like, anyway, I think you see where I'm going with that. So, and also gives away obviously my kind of thought on these things, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe, there's again, risk reward. Maybe there's trade-offs. So where does back squat fit into this, right? I feel like we pretty much got nailed down the Olympic lifts as far as like, risk reward, what athletes shouldn't, how important, but what about more general things such as a back squat? Is it unnecessary for certain athletes, or should every athlete back squat? Kind of same general population. If you are able to, do a squat with the bar on your back, should people be doing that? Or is that something that everyone does just because everyone does it and we should all stop?
I kind of think the squat's just a life skill. If you can't do it, you're gonna die earlier than your friends, or
it's probably true.
You're gonna need somebody to help you to stay alive.
Yeah.
Like you can't get on a couch or off the couch or a toilet.
100%.
You're kind of cooked. I think broken hips is like the number one or one of the like highest causes of mortality, I think, for the elderly, and that's just. I mean, that's strength, right? The thing about back squat, it's like, what adaptations do we get when you do a back squat? Our legs get stronger, our core gets stronger. We learn how to brace, practice, stretch, shortening cycles. So we get used to like loading attention and snapping out of it. But also the only like way to improve our bone density is to load our skeletal system. There's maybe other ways to do that, but I'd say the back squat might be one of the most effective ways to load our skeletal system. I don't know the argument you could make to say that they're just generally bad because you're just bending your knees and then you're standing up.
He also at one point said that he was, as a younger man, training as a power lifter around a bunch of guys that were training irresponsibly. And then he went on to say the back squats are bad for everybody's back because he hurt his back doing them.
Yeah, I mean, low bar back squat is pretty lame.
I agree.
I'm just playing. It is. I mean, it's a different movement, but I'm not gonna do them. But yeah, like the powerlift. That's I don't know. I feel like that's more of a sport than training. Like
Right.
it. Like I think a full range of motion, like regular movements. It's like they're sort of playing this game where they're like trying to find some kind of efficiency that makes the movement easier and not the most productive, right? Like the most effective way to do a back squat is probably a longer range of motion, probably loaded on your shoulders, not your back. Just like to get the best training response on your bench press, it's probably like a more like neutral grip, elbows a little tighter, whereas they'll grip out about as wide as they can. Some of the women will arch their backs until their tits are already on the bar. Once they unrack it, they've got about a 2 inch range of motion. Like, did they even train when they did that exercise? I don't know. I don't know that that's like a productive way to train.
Yeah, you get into
So that
performance first training at that point, right?
right, right. And that's like, that if when his experience with back squats was how much weight can I get on the bar, not how can I utilize this as a tool to make me better at other things, that might have been what like messed up his thought on back squat. But even in like Olympic weightlifting, squats are an accessory exercise. It's
Coach
not.
Metz. Oh, sorry, Wes. I don't know where you.
That's it.
I thought,
That's it.
Coach Metz, your thoughts? Your
Out.
thoughts on back squatting for athletes and that type of stuff in general?
Yeah,
And feel free to say whatever you want about Mike Boyle, being that you're in the industry where everybody knows who he is.
I probably won't. But so to your one point though about like using, oh, I got hurt back squatting. My other side of the argument to that, I get very frustrated when people like pick a specific movement or exercise where they got hurt, because the flip side to that argument is that
Yeah.
you don't know how many injuries you being so strong in that movement prevented. So there's no way for you to count that. And that used to really bother me a lot in the college setting, is like, I think strength coaches get blamed for injuries in the sport. And it's like, okay, this person got hurt, but you have no idea. Like there could have been 20 other ones had we not been training this way. Like there's no way for us to gauge that.
Furthermore, just because the injury happened while you were back squatting does not mean that back squat is what caused the injury. It was likely an underlying condition that was going to come out at some point, and this was just the movement that exposed it, right?
Absolutely. And just to give a really quick story, I had an athlete doing deadlifts. We were maxing out on reps. It was pretty heavy. She went to go do one, doing great. On her fourth rep, she just felt her back tighten, and that was that. And, come to find out later, she was dehydrated, wasn't drinking any water, wasn't eating. They had just come from practice. I gave the coach the conditioning plan, and he decided to go off script and make them run so much more. So it's like there were all these other variables, but guess what? She got hurt doing trap bar deadlifts, and now trap bar deadlift is bad. So there's a lot of issue with that I see. But to answer the question about back squat, as far as my own training philosophy with my athletes, I've moved away from back squatting athletes like in the team setting. But as far as training that lift, like I do it myself, and I've actually done it for years. And Wes can testify to this. Like I used to back squat in really, really bad positions, and it used to hurt a lot. And until I learned how to back squat the correct way to move more weight, like then it was fine. And I could back squat whenever I felt like it. So I think it has a lot to do with, again, what's the stimulus, but also how are you loading it? And it's not a taboo thing. Like you don't have to be for it or against it. I'm a big fan of teaching front squat first as a foundation, so that when we move to back squat, it's that much easier if we do. But I have moved away from it just because I've run into a lot of athletes that seem to struggle with axial loading. So bar on the back, loading the spine. I find that sometimes anatomically, it just isn't the best fit for athletes. So it's like, what's your argument for a 6'10" basketball player? Do they need to back squat with their, butt on their calves? I don't know. So I think there's other ways to get that stimulus. So I don't think back squat's a bad movement by any means. I just think it has to depend on, again, your population and what are you trying to get out of it.
So what do you do instead for athletes? If you don't, do you front squat? Is it more of, you mentioned trap bar deadlifts, but that's not really necessarily loading the skeletal spine like Wes was saying. What do you do for the athletes that don't back squat?
So it depends again on my setting and things that are available. I've done a lot of pit shark work with them, so they still get that
Hip loaded
patterning. We front squat. I know Wes is a big fan of trap bar deadlift, and so we do things like that. But like I said, I've moved away from the axial loading stuff just because I find that it makes it a lot easier for athletes to be able to do everything. And you can still load a trap bar up pretty well. If you teach the front squat correctly, you can load that. You can load a pit shark a ton. So there are other options. You just have to search for them.
You mentioned the trap bar deadlift. I know that, so this is another one of those. Now, here's my question, and make sure you answer honestly, or however you think will help your business be the most successful. Do you think that trap bar deadlifts is actually a safer slash equivalent or potentially better movement than a standard deadlift? Or is that just something you do because coaches won't complain as much?
I think it's a bit more friendly. People seem to appreciate pulling with the weight on the sides of their body being in the middle of that bar, versus it being in front of them.
People like the athletes, or people like the coaches you work with think it's more friendly for their athletes?
The athletes, you still will see some technical breakdown, but I find that it's a lot easier to get them in the right position on a trap bar than on a straight bar.
Yeah, I'm kind of torn on this. I feel like people should be able to deadlift with a bar with something in front of them. I also feel like if the purpose of a deadlift to a certain degree, it is a life skill. You drop something on the ground, you should be able to pick it up. And there's always the classic, hey, this, doctor says this 80-year-old woman shouldn't be deadlifting. And she's like, well, if I go to the grocery store, can I carry the groceries into my house? And he says, yes. And he's like, well, when I go to unlock my door, can I put the bags down and unlock the door and then pick up the bags and carry them in? And of course, the answer is yes. Right. And so but if you think of those specific types of movements, like in life, most of the time, picking something up off the ground, especially if it's something heavy or there's multiple of them, like having the weight off to your sides instead of directly in front of you may be just as practical. Right. Wes, tell us why trap bars are dumb.
Well, because there's regular bars mostly.
There we go. All right, next topic.
They're super big. They need their own special place to store them. It costs more money to buy more bars.
So it's not that you're against the trap bar deadlift specifically. You just think that it's unnecessary and it's something that Rogue and Fringe Sport like to sell.
Yeah, I think what do we get out of it? The weight's loaded 2 inches further back on the body as they go to pick it up. Also, you get the higher handle, so they don't have to squat down as low, so that you can now load more weight. So now you put more weight on the body that's the exact same strength. I don't know. I'm gonna look to the tools I have as opposed to try to find a new one, I guess. And it's just already a pretty easy thing. A deadlift is a pretty easy movement. I'll just lean towards like we're just gonna do deadlifts right, as opposed to. But like one thing I think is cool to do with the trap bar is like a dynamic deadlift where you sort of jump through the top. Like I think that's sort of a cool way to like load an explosive movement. You don't have to worry about catching the weight. You miss out on the force absorption a little bit, but whatever. Like you get to do some snappy deadlifts. I think that's a neat thing you can do with a trap bar that you wouldn't do like with your conventional deadlift. But yeah, I don't know. You see these things they just get moved to primary positions in training protocol, like the big padded barbell, and then the handles you need on the squat rack to do your squats to just barely parallel. I mean, we have these coaches have the best. They just have the best athletes in the arguably the world, at least the country, doing these things. Like, let's just figure out how to use the barbell. It's a good tool.
You mentioned how the handles are a little bit higher. You guys ever hear of the competition of the 18-inch deadlift?
I think my buddy Ralph, he's a strong man, was telling me that they have like some different heights on those, and they get them pretty high sometimes.
We were in LSU. We're at LSU. We were met with Matt Bruce, and then met with Hatch, and Coach Hatch introduced us to a young man there, and then said, "This guy's got the world record on the 18-inch deadlift." And what it is they just start with platforms that are 18 inches off the ground. And so you deadlift off these platforms 18 inches off the ground. So the bar only moves. I mean, it depends on how tall you are. Like, I mean, Coach Metz, that thing's not going very far. And I mean, anyway, it is awesome though. Like these guys, it's like, oh yeah, he just deadlifted 1,600 pounds. It's like, yeah, because he moves at 6 inches. Like, anyway,
Metz might have the world record because I don't know that she'd have to move it.
I think that's the next sport that I'm gonna need to get into.
Go. All right, wait a
4-ton 18-inch deadlift.
Let's go through. I got a question from somebody. So let's do this question real quick, and then just some little rapid fire. We'll wrap it up. We started a little late today. I don't know why, because looks like Tyler Vlasic down there was a little bit late. All right, Wes had to go steal somebody's computer. All right, so this goes guy. Question from Michael on Instagram. His name is at lift.dad. So my goal is to do my first Olympic weightlifting event next year. He's gonna be 44 years old. Basically, he's right now mostly trains as a power lifter, a little bit of CrossFit. Can an old dog learn new tricks? What does someone coming from CrossFit over to weightlifting need to change/undo? I'm strong, but have white boy rhythm.
I can't dance either.
I was gonna say, is there a dance competition?
I'm not really sure. That was just, hey, I'm just reading the comment here. He did the little winky face after that, so yeah, I think he knows that's a joke as well. So somebody wants to do, you got a CrossFitter, 44 years old, wants to do a weightlifting meet. Should he just not? Or if you knew someone was going to do that, what's a little piece of advice you'd give him?
I'd tell everybody this: find a weightlifting coach, ideally local, somebody that can get eyes on you in person and sort of work with you on the technique. Don't worry about the weight on the bar at first. Just get used to like good patterns and good movement, and then sort of let the weight come up as they get easier, right? Like don't force a max. Just move well until the weights get there. And what you'll find when you hyper focus on weightlifting is you get better at it. You know, you go from doing snatch twice a month to 4 or 5 times a week. It's not so hard anymore, and you'll get better. But yeah, just start with a coach and somebody can help you out. Don't guess.
Coach Metz, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, do the competition. Like, I'm not a dream killer. If you want to go do it, like, give it a try. My assumption is that they already have a decent understanding of the movements of snatch and clean and jerk. It's going to be different as far as what's happening on the platform. Like they may only catch in the power position, so above parallel. So you're going to find other lifters are going to full squat, and probably the biggest obstacle will be just understanding how things run in the back room and when to warm up. And, I think the logistics of the meet is going to be the most shocking piece of it, but probably will do great on the platform. And like Wes said, just don't worry about the weight or other people. Just go out there and just do what you want to do. And if you love it, try it again. And if you hate it, at least you can check the box. So go for it.
Yeah, I like Wes's. I think that's great. I think both your guys' to kind of tie them together, try to find a coach or a local team you can train with, but a local coach. And if you don't find a coach nearby you, when you go to the first meet, you can do what I did is you just look around and you find someone who's coaching someone else who looks friendly enough and just go up to them and say, hey, this is my first meet. I have no idea what the I'm doing. Will you please help me with my warmups? And they will almost certainly say yes. They'll probably tell you they'll ask you what your openers are or tell you to sit down, and then they'll guide you through the warm-up phase. In general, most weightlifting coaches are happy if someone's doing their first meet and are happy to help, but ask for that help. Don't try and do it yourself because you're just going to get all messed up.
Wait, I'm going to give one more tip. Please, if it's your first weightlifting meet, know your weight openers in kilos, not pounds, because I have been helping with weightlifting meets, and during weigh-ins is when you give your openers, and I've had people not know that, and they gave me their openers in pounds, and I was like, oh wow, you're all right, you're strong, let's go.
Really strong.
They were not.
So, you didn't figure it out? It
wasn't my job. I was like, all
right. Did they go out and try it?
Oh yeah. Like, don't do that. Or maybe find someone in weigh-in that understands that it's your first meet. So.
Oh my God. What happened? What happened when they tried to lift it?
Well, they bombed out.
If only someone would have said like, wow, that's a lot, you know?
I said that and I was like, wow, that's a lot.
Could you imagine?
They're like, hell yeah, it is.
Well, you think it's one thing and it's twice as much?
More.
Oh my God, I'm dying. Like, I'm dying thinking about it because I remember it being like, oh, jeez.
All right, there we go. Now, quick little, yeah, let's go from there because we're short on time here. Okay. Rapid fire. So try to keep these short, just, a couple words, whatever, a couple sentences, I guess, at most. So no fillers, just quick answers. Here we go. We'll go Mets first. All right. Worst coaching cue you've ever heard?
Oh God, I don't know.
I don't know. That would be not a good
Yeah,
one.
I don't know. I feel like I've had some quality coaching, and I only stick with like whatever sticks in my head is what makes sense. So if someone says something bad to me, it gets dumped. I don't
Yeah,
know.
that's fair. Sometimes I hear someone say something wild, and I'm like, oh, dude, like I can't. It never leaves me. All right, Wes, what about you? What's the worst coaching you've ever heard?
All right, so David McKellar was about to do some really heavy back squats, and the Spitz was on this like core to core kick, and we'd sort of been giving him a hard time about his core to core cue. His me embrace both sides instead of just your back. And then Dave busts out, like yells it because this is an intense moment. McKellar's going heavy. Tighten your abdominis.
Yeah,
Nobody kept it together. Everybody's laughing, and it's only funnier because David's just like dying under this barbell. So it only amplifies the hilarity of the moment. So David probably missed that squat. I'm crying, laughing, and Dave probably went to his office after that. But that was probably one of the worst moments in coaching history.
Perfect segue, actually. Coach Metz, what's a better term? Do you use the term core or midline?
Core.
Wes?
Core.
Oh man, so you guys are all telling people like tighten their intestines. It never made the core thing never made sense to me. Like there's not the center of anything, right? It's like I don't know. I don't really like midline either. Just every time someone says core, I'm just like, I don't know how. I say it too sometimes because people know what it means, but I never. I think it's a terrible term.
I like the term brace.
Like trunk? Oh, okay.
Trunk. I like trunk. Trunk is good. I think trunk is good. I think people know what trunk means. I usually go to midline. I don't know, just core. Just like you're not. That's not what you're doing. That's not what you're doing.
Well, I teach my athletes that your core is not just like your abs. Like your core is like your whole like front, back, like through your hip girdle, like everything.
Yeah,
So when I say that, I think like all of that.
I get that, but what you're describing is not the core. You're describing the outside.
Yeah, sure. We're not gonna squeeze our intestines like you.
That's what I'm saying. That's my point. This is why it throws me off all the time. That's why
you think of it like a planet. It's like you're thinking planetary core.
Well, I'm thinking like the actual word, like in every other aspect of
Apple
using
core.
the word.
Yeah.
Or like so. Ben and Jerry's caramel core. It's the middle. The core's the middle.
Right down the middle. Right. Yeah, it is.
Anyway, I don't know. I thought maybe you guys had something for me here. A trunk. I do like trunk. Maybe I'll try that one. All right. When you're trying to get someone, okay, this earlier talking about people lifting, yelling at them, trying to get someone fired up, motivated. Is it better to actually yell advice or just like nonsense words to get them pumped up?
Nonsense. Yeah, I mean, but like you're not going to yell technical cues to them. If someone was like, "Move your feet, elbows up," I'd be like, "What?" I wouldn't be like jacked to go like.
Yeah, Wes.
Yeah, you just want to scream in their face, get a little spit on them, slap them around a little bit, smelling salts.
Hell yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah. Me too. Yeah, it's like people yell like, "Let's go." I yell, we nonsense we call all the time. You know, we'd say like, "Shake them." Like they're not shaking any. I shake them. We go hot, wet, shake them. You just kind of mix those up in different orders, gets people going. I'm telling you, just if you ever want to get someone fired up, you know what to say. Just start hot, wet, shake them. Mix, different orders every time. Okay. Best thing to listen to on the drive to practice.
I'm gonna have an unpopular opinion here.
Maybe not.
So I actually like to lift to country music. It just helps me.
All right, there we go.
Do that, but I listen to like murder podcasts as well. So probably not popular.
Does it have to be music on the drive to training?
No, you listen to whatever you want, man. That's
no. Okay. Well, number one, this is the right answer, is old videos of CT Fletcher doing personal training.
Do you actually listen to that on the drive to the gym?
From San Ramon High School to Cal Strength, about every Friday.
There. All right. There we go. And the most overrated accessory movement. What's the accessory movement everybody says you have to do that you think's a waste of time?
I really, really hate, and I don't think I've done them in a while, but like little like overloaded lift offs where you lift the bar like barely off the ground. I don't see a point for me.
Yeah, like rack pulls or like
kind of, but you're pulling from the ground. It's super heavy. I used to have to do them a long, long time ago. And I remember based on the percentages you're supposed to do, it was like over what I could deadlift. And I was like, how am I supposed to? Okay. So
I'm gonna go jerk supports. It's mostly just elbow, wrist, and shoulder pain, just in a nice little exercise. I don't know.
It's kind of a similar thing, just like very partial range,
Overloaded.
overloaded partial range stuff.
Yeah. I want to say split squats just because I hate them, but I think they're probably good for me.
Interesting on those is like those jerk supports. I guess the theory is like anyway. What I'm getting to is I don't guess I kind of don't see the point either, because if it's more than what you can jerk, then you don't really but you can do the jerk supports. So you're strong enough to support that weight, but you're not strong enough to jerk it. Why do you need to practice supporting something that you can already do if you can't even do the movement to get it there?
I don't know.
Does that make sense? Was that a giant circle, or are you kind of following me on that?
Yeah, no. If we're talking about risk versus reward, like let's talk about locking weights out overhead that we could never lift up there. Like that's
why do we if we're capable of doing the exercise at more than we're capable of putting there, why do we need to practice holding the weight overhead if we can already do it?
I don't know. Let's see.
Maybe you guys will hate me. I used to do those a lot. She really liked that.
I don't. Well, you feel strong. I like feeling strong. That's cool.
The reason
I'm not against them. That's why.
Well, I was gonna say the reason I did them was just to give my shoulder exposure to the weight overhead on days where I was like, I just can't jerk today. Like my shoulder is very messed up.
Sure.
And those weren't painful for me, but I could still get exposure to an overhead, just like lockout feeling. So that's why I did them. But
yeah. Well, your answer, it's similar on the deadlift thing, right? It's like if I can't do a full deadlift with this weight, but I am capable of moving it an inch off the ground, why do I need to practice doing the thing I'm already strong enough to do if I'm not strong enough to do the rest of the movement?
Yeah.
It's kind of the same. It's the same thing, just opposite ends, right? All right. That's a wrap for this episode of Not in My Box. Big thanks to Coach Metz and the Olympian Wes Kitts for somehow making Olympic lifting sound noble, despite the obvious fact that it's a ridiculous activity. Share this episode with a coach who still preaches triple extension like it's 2011, or with your training partner who sports that Attitude Nation red circle tattoo. We'll be back next week with another topic everyone's got an opinion on. If you have a question for the expert panel, shoot me a DM or comment on the video. And remember, if it was pretty, it probably wasn't heavy enough.